girl finna be bigger than Jobs.
Right.
Bigger than Gates.
Right.
Bigger than Pym.
Right.
Bigger than Stark.
Yeah.
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
Do you think Tony Stark would be Tony Stark if he wasn't a billionaire?
Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
But I don't have $1 billion.
With a box of scraps.
Hello, I'm Cinemod470. I feel I should start off with saying that I don't dislike Riri Williams because she's a black woman. I dislike her because she's a narcissistic, immoral, pretentious wanker who has no business taking over Tony Stark's legacy. Tony Stark represented not only intelligence and innovation, but that you can change your ways despite being set in them. Whereas Riri Williams is supposed to represent the downtrodden, rising above her station, but comes off as arrogant and disrespects everything Tony stood for. For this video, I'll mainly be using the first Iron Man movie and the Ironheart series as sources to explore both characters in terms of their privilege, intelligence, morality, character arcs, and why they wear the suit. Because Tony does have a longer history and Riri is relatively new, I want to give them both a fair shake. And if you like what I do, subscribe if you haven't. If we can hit 1,000, I can start getting paid for my videos. Riri Williams is constantly portrayed to be oppressed due to her socio-economic status, and that she needs money to build her suit. However, both private companies and the US government should be lining up to buy her technology, since she successfully created her own iron suit that's powered by wind and solar energy, not an arc reactor. That was the whole plotline of Iron Man 2, that other entities and factions want this technology to revolutionize warfare. Riri also has connections to Wakanda and a Stark Fellowship, and yet, Shuri doesn't give Riri the funding or resources she constantly says she needs. And Pepper for some reason doesn't give Riri a job. Also, the Dean of MIT, not him, her, stated that Riri's whole curriculum was reworked to suit her needs, completely dismantling Riri's statement about other people keeping her small.
That's a hot pile of garbage. Trash, and you know it. Who here asked you to be small? I brought you here because the field would have devoured 15-year-old you. So we tailored a course of study to your needs.
The whole thing reeks of contrivance, so Riri appears oppressed and feels forced to do illegal actions. Though Tony Stark had the resources to match his genius, he built his arc reactor and first suit
In a cave with a box of scraps.
Okay, to be fair, that line is hyperbole. He didn't actually build his arc reactor and suit with a box of scraps. Tony Stark built them with materials used to build a Jericho missile with a life-threatening heart condition, and while under the watchful eyes of the terrorists who kept him captive for 3 months. But I guess that doesn't roll off the tongue as well. Though Tony is a billionaire, that isn't what made him Iron Man. What made him Iron Man was that after he had his money, resources, and bravado stripped away, he had to use his intellect to build what he needed with whatever he had available. And speaking of intelligence, Riri is constantly called a genius throughout the series. And yet, despite having an entire curriculum rearranged to suit her needs, Riri's experiments fail, cause damage to campus property, and injure one of the professors. Also, one of the inventions she made was a personal force field that could protect the wearer from all harm, and could even be activated at the sound of a gunshot. If patented or sold legitimately, that technology alone should get her the funding she needs. Especially since it appears relatively simpler to make in comparison to an entire iron suit, since she can just sell it to a student for a few $100. And finally, she decides to make a deal with the literal devil.
You can call me Mephisto.
Now granted, Mephisto never says he's the devil, but it's pretty obvious. He's a being of otherworldly power with multiple names. He gave Parker a hood of immense magical power that scared a Kamar-Taj-trained sorcerer, and he's offering Riri a deal with a nebulous cost. Lucifer Morningstar was more subtle than this guy. And even if Riri couldn't figure out Mephisto is the devil, she's seen the outcome of his deal with Parker, and how the Hood's magic was slowly corrupting him despite getting everything he wanted. So yeah, Riri's intelligence is very inconsistent. Because despite being able to create multiple scientific wonders, she lacks the critical thinking to apply them to get the funding she needs and can't recognize an obvious threat that walks and talks like the devil. Though Tony was established to be a child prodigy, the Iron Man movie knew how to use his intelligence to both his advantage and disadvantage. Because though Tony is smart enough to build a suit
in a cave with a box of scraps
and think his way out of high-stress situations, such as when his suit froze and he was falling out of the sky, and when he had to fight Stain with an underpowered arc reactor, Tony's high intelligence also causes him to have a large ego, which leads to Tony not taking a critical look at himself or his actions until he experiences the negative effects and has to fix himself. Now, a similar instance where Tony was tricked despite his intelligence was when he didn't realize how bad Obadiah Stane was until it was too late. But the reason Tony got blindsided was because Stane quite literally raised and mentored Tony after his parents died, and his time in captivity made him think about the lack of genuine human connections he had. So, I doubt the idea that his mentor would want to kill him ever crossed his mind. But that's the real divide between Tony and Riri, because Riri is constantly stated to be a genius and is given all the tools and information to succeed, but makes stupid mistakes, whereas Tony's intelligence is written to be a double-edged sword. Ironheart also doesn't understand morality or responsibility, which is pretty important when writing a superhero show.
You're just a selfish kid who can't take any responsibility for herself. You lie, you cheat, you manipulate. You'll do anything you can to save yourself, even if that means hurting other people in the process.
Riri keeps going on about how the system keeps her down, which causes her to work for criminals to make enough money to continue building her suit. However, several of her problems are of her own making. Not because other more privileged people are keeping her from succeeding. She gets kicked out of MIT because her experiments caused her professor serious harm, while also selling her tech to other students from other schools so they can pass them off as their own work. Interesting how she knows how to do that but not sell her tech to legitimate companies. Whereas Tony's whole deal is how he starts off believing that creating weapons for the government was how to keep innocent people safe, while also using the profits from those sales to fund other more humanitarian interests.
It's an imperfect world, but it's the only one we've got. I guarantee you the day weapons are no longer needed to keep the peace, I'll start making bricks and beams for baby hospitals. Okay, here's serious. My old man had a philosophy. Peace means having a bigger stick than the other guy. Tell me, do you plan to report on the millions we've saved by advancing medical technology or kept from starvation with our IntelliCrops? All those breakthroughs, military funding, honey.
Only to realize how his technology in the wrong hands can cause harm to those innocent people he wanted to protect. So the very same day Tony returns to America, he shuts down his weapons program, even though it would cost him billions, and runs the risk of him losing control of his company. And when his suit was fully functioning, Tony would risk his own life to save people. And whenever Tony's decisions were criticized, he was at least able to back up his stance with a good argument. And if he was wrong, he learned and got better. While Riri is literally committing crimes, she protests that she's not a criminal because she isn't hurting people. She may not be causing physical harm, if we ignore the cops she blew up in Wakanda Forever, but extortion and robbery is still harming people, no matter what their net worth is. She even blackmails Ezekiel Stane to get his technology, and because of her carelessness, Riri left the tech at one of her crime scenes. And Ezekiel not only got arrested, but got turned into an evil cyborg and lost his bodily autonomy. And though Riri saved him from the hood, she never apologizes for the crap she did that put him in that position. Finally, there's when Riri let cousin John suffocate to death. Now, granted, John wasn't a good man, and his death can be argued as self-defense, but dying of suffocation is neither quick nor painless. If the writers wanted to exonerate Riri of any wrongdoing, they could have made her AI Natalie take full control of the suit and kept Riri from saving John. And though Riri is guilt-ridden by John's death, she gets over it by the next episode because of the worst analysis of morality from her friend Xavier.
Good, bad, the words don't really mean anything. It's all depending on who's labeling you.
First of all, the only time people say good and evil are subjective is when they're trying to convince other people that they're not evil. And secondly, good and evil are objective by measuring the amount of harm being caused. If someone is building an experimental energy source to give free energy to the world, that's good. But if that same someone ignores the clear damage that energy source causes and feels compelled to build it anyway while stealing money to fund it, then that's evil. Now granted, Iron Man also killed his enemies, but when handling killing in a superhero narrative, you have to be consistent with how the hero feels about taking lives and whether it conflicts with what they stand for. Since Tony was a weapons manufacturer, I doubt he cared if the bad guys died. Plus, those bad guys were literal terrorists who were attacking unarmed villagers, using people as human shields, and wanted to abuse his technology to take over the world. Since Riri is a relatively normal person, it's understandable that she would be affected by someone's death, especially considering she witnessed the deaths of her stepfather and best friend in a drive-by shooting. At least, she should be, even if that person tried to kill her, but the effect lasts less than half an episode. Also, despite his attitude towards killing, Tony does have a moral compass. If someone is put in danger, he doesn't stop until they're saved, even at the risk of his own life. And when he was a weapons manufacturer, Tony wanted those weapons to be in the right hands, and he never approved of people selling his weapons under the table to terrorists. A common take I keep hearing when people defend Riri's bad behavior is by comparing it to other heroes who start off with similar morals, like Tony, Doctor Strange, Star-Lord, Thor, and even Ant-Man. But here's the thing, the events of their respective journeys made them better people. This is what we high society cinephiles call a character arc. Not something that was just known by high society, but it has become increasingly obvious that certain creative talents have forgotten. You see, Riri doesn't have a consistent character arc. This idea the spectators push about Riri realizing her choices are wrong and has to grow as a person doesn't exist, because the narrative exonerates her of any wrongdoing, while also not following up on the in-universe criticisms about her character. And Riri never takes responsibility for her actions. When being expelled from MIT, the only thing Riri says in her defense is that other people want to keep her small. When Ezekiel Stain goes to prison for Riri's actions and gets turned into a mind-controlled cyborg, she accepts no blame despite being called out. And finally, when Riri is trying to merge magic into her suit to fight the Hood, she's told that there would be a cost, which at the time she was fully aware of and accepted. But when that cost is the AI copy of her dead friend Natalie, Riri blames magic instead of herself. If handled by a more competent writer, Riri's lack of responsibility could be used as room for growth. But this avoidance of accountability makes her look like a villain.
That is not what heroes do.
Another arc that could have made Riri interesting was her being unable to come to terms with the loss of her best friend and stepfather. And there is evidence of that since she refuses to go to the garage where they died, and in doing so risks losing the happy memories they shared and the positive impact they've had. And the entire plotline of Riri unintentionally making an AI of her dead best friend could have been a good avenue for her inability to accept loss. But then she makes a literal deal with the literal devil to bring Natalie back to life. So yeah, that's another idea tossed out the window. The only real arc she goes through is letting her loved ones help her, which is not nearly as interesting as the previous two ideas, because Riri is still a terrible person who doesn't feel the need to improve herself. And her arc pales in comparison to Tony's. Tony starts off rich, respected, and has a firm belief in creating weapons for the government. But those things get stripped away when he gets captured by the terrorists using those same weapons and is forced to build more for them. But despite not having money or respect and his belief structure shaken, Tony still has his intellect and Yinsen, the doctor who saved his life and assisted Tony's escape at the cost of his own. During their time together, Tony understands that he's been wasting both his intelligence and his life, and when he gets home, he wants to become a better man. So he shuts down his weapons division, and makes it his life's mission to keep his weapons out of irresponsible hands. I want to end this video with one final topic: why both Tony and Riri wear the suit. Tony became Iron Man for two reasons. Because his technology was being sold to terrorists without his knowledge and the authorities couldn't stop them, and because he didn't want to waste his life. So he created Iron Man to do something good with it. At first, Riri says she built her suit because the technology would help first responders and revolutionize safety, which she could have done if she focused on her bubble shield. But then she says she wants to build something iconic. So I'm left to wonder if that speech she gave at the beginning of the series was just to convince the Dean not to expel her.
You're capable of building something iconic.
Then she says that she built the suit because everyone likes iron suits and it will help her stand out, which makes Riri come off as arrogant since she has no reverence for Tony and she looks like she just wants recognition for surpassing him. And that belief is reinforced by her earlier monologue about giving suits to more people, even though Tony no longer wanted his technology available to the public, since he understood the damage they could cause. Then Riri says over and over that she built the suit because she could, which none of the side characters believe. Then Riri finally admits that she built the suit because she felt powerless when her best friend and stepfather died. But this desire to protect her loved ones isn't properly portrayed throughout the series because it's clashed with these preceding reasons of wanting to be iconic and get recognition. Tony Stark works because he was more than a man with $1 billion and a metal suit. Tony was a man who, despite having a strong belief in what he did, learned the harsh reality of his actions, and did everything he could to make things right, which is what made him a hero. Riri Williams doesn't work because her character is all over the place. Despite having every resource she needs, Riri doesn't use them and turns to crime. Despite having clear character flaws that the universe calls her out on, Riri doesn't acknowledge or overcome them and only doubles down with the belief that the rest of the world is wrong. And it makes her look like a villain.